Web Development Roadmap. In this part, we're gonna go through Web Development Roadmap. Step 1. Learn the basics. Every web developer must have a basic understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Responsive web design is used in all types of modern web development. ECMAScript 5 or JavaScript 5 is supported in all modern browsers. Take a good look at it, especially the new array functions. As the first step, you have to learn HTML, HTTP XHR, CSS, CSS responsive, JavaScript, and ECMAScript 5. Step 2. Dig deeper. When you feel comfortable with HTML and CSS, it's time to dig deeper. You should learn how to use maps, fonts, and icons in HTML. On the JavaScript side, you should learn how to access the HTML DOM. You should also learn how to use AJAX and JSON for making server requests. As step 2, you have to learn HTML DOM, Google Maps, Google Fonts, in CSS part, CSS icons, and in JavaScript, XML, JSON, and AJAX. Step 3. Choose the framework. On the CSS side, you should choose a framework for responsive web design, like Bootstrap, Material Design, or W3 CSS. On the JavaScript side, you should learn at least one modern framework, like React.js, Angular.js, Vue.js, or W3.js. Maybe the popularity of jQuery has passed the top, but it's still the most used JavaScript framework. As step 3, you have to learn CSS, Bootstrap, or W3 CSS, or Material Design, or other frameworks. In JavaScript part, you have to learn jQuery, Angular.js, Vue.js, or W3.js, and also XML, XSLT, XPath, or XQuery. Step 4. Learn the backend. If you want to become a full-stack web developer, you have to learn SQL, PHP, ASP, and Python. And if you want to become full-stack JS developer, JavaScript developer, you can learn SQL, Node.js, MySQL, and MongoDB. In this part, let's dive into more in details. What's HTTP? HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. www is about communication between web clients and servers. Communication between client computers and web servers is done by sending HTTP requests and receiving HTTP responses. World Wide Web communication. The World Wide Web is about communication between web clients and web servers. Clients are often browsers like Chrome, Edge, Safari, but they can be any type of program or device. Servers are most often computers in the cloud. HTTP request response. Communication between clients and servers is done by requests and responses. A client or browser sends an HTTP request to the web, and web server receives the request. The server runs an application to process the request. Server returns an HTTP response or output to the browser, and the client or the browser receives the response. The HTTP request circle. A typical HTTP request response circle has 5 parts. The browser requests an HTML page. The server returns an HTML file. Second, the browser requests a style sheet. The server returns a CSS file. Third, the browser requests an JPG image. The server returns a JPG file. Fourth, the browser requests JavaScript code. The server returns a JS file. 5. The browser requests data. The server returns data in XML or JSON. XHR, XML, HTTP request. All browsers have a built-in XML HTTP request object, or XHR. XHR is a JavaScript object that's used to transfer data between a web browser and a web server. XHR is often used to request and receive data for the purpose of modifying a web page. Despite the XML and HTTP in the name, XHR is used with other protocols than HTTP, and the data can be of many different types, like HTML, CSS, XML, JSON, and plaintext. XHR, XML, HTTP request. The XHR object is a web developer's dream because you can update a web page without reloading the page, request data from a server after the page has loaded, receive data from a server after the page has loaded, and send data to a server in the background. What's HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is the standard markup language for web pages. HTML elements are the building blocks of HTML pages. HTML elements are represented by tags. HTML elements. An HTML element is a start tag and an end tag with content in between. like this. H1 is the start tag, and this is a heading, is the content, and /h1 is the end tag. HTML attributes. HTML elements can have attributes. Attributes provide additional information about the element. Attributes come in name-value pairs, like charset, UTF-8. Like here, meta, charset, UTF-8. Meta is an element, and charset is equal to UTF-8 is an attribute. Here you can see. A simple HTML document. Here, in this example, the doc-type HTML declaration defines this document to be HTML5. The HTML element is the root element of an HTML page. The lang attribute defines the language of the document. The meta element contains meta information about the document. The charset attribute defines the character set used in the document. The title element specifies the title for the document. The body element contains the visible page content. The H1 element defines a large heading. The P element defines a paragraph. HTML documents. All HTML documents must start with the document type declaration, like doc-type HTML. The HTML document itself begins with HTML and ends with /HTML. The visible part of the HTML document is between body and /body, or the end tag body. HTML document structure. Here you can see. Only the content inside the body section, the wide array above, is displayed in the browser. Here we have some examples like HTML headings, here you can see, HTML paragraphs, HTML links, HTML images, HTML buttons, HTML lists. There are different codes for different features that we have in HTML. Like HTML tables. Here you can see we have a table with the headings of first name, last name, and age, and here the contents. Programming HTML. Every HTML element can have attributes. For web development and programming, the most important attributes are ID and class. These attributes are often used to address program-based web page manipulations. What's CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. CSS describes how HTML elements are to be displayed. CSS syntax. A CSS rule consists of a selector and a declaration block. The selector points to the HTML element to style, like H1. The declaration block in curly braces contains one or more declarations separated by semicolons. Each declaration includes a CSS property, name, and a value separated by colon. Like here you can see. We have selector, we have declaration. External style sheet. A CSS style sheet can be stored in an external file. Like here you can see we have an external file with the name of mystyle.css, and inside it we have CSS declarations. External style sheets are linked to HTML page with link tags. Like here you can see. We have link, rel, style sheet, and we have another thread, mystyle.css. Cascading order. If different styles are specified for HTML elements, the styles will cascade into new styles with the following priority. Here you can see. First we have inline styles. Second we have external and internal style sheets. Third we have browser default styles. If different styles are defined on the same priority level, the last one has the highest priority. Here you can see we have same HTML page with different CSS styles. Like style sheet 1, here you can see this is how it's styled. This is the second one. This is the third one. This is the fourth one, and this one has no style. It's just an HTML web page with no CSS styles. What's responsive design? Responsive web design is about using HTML and CSS to automatically resize a website. Responsive web design is about making a website look good on all devices like desktops, tablets, and phones. Setting the viewport. Here you can see we have a meta element with some attributes like content width is equal to device width, initial scale 1.0. This is how we set the viewport inside our HTML web page. In the head part. Media queries. Here you can see we have an example of media queries. Media, screen, and max width is 800 pixels, like go, change the left, min, right, weight 100%. You will learn all these things. Responsive image. Responsive images are images that scale nicely to fit any browser size. When the CSS width property is set to a percentage value, an image will scale up and down when resizing the browser window. To add responsiveness to our image, we have to add the width of our image with percentage. Here it is. Image depending on browser size. The HTML picture element allows you to define different images for different browser window sizes. Like here you can see, we have one picture element with different sources. Like if the max width is 600 pixels, use small flower image, or if the max width is 1500 pixels, use image flowers.jpg. Or for default one, use flowers.jpg. And if the browser does not support picture element, just use image small flower.jpg. CSS frameworks. As we said, in the web development roadmap, you have to specify a CSS framework for yourself. It can be Bootstrap, or Materialize, or UKit, or Bulma, or W3 CSS, or Matchmo. What's JavaScript? JavaScript is the programming language for the web. JavaScript can update and change both HTML and CSS. JavaScript can calculate, manipulate, and validate data. JavaScript variables. Here you can see, var x is equal to 5, var y is equal to 6, and var z is equal to x plus 1. JavaScript numbers. JavaScript has only one type of number. Numbers can be written with or without decimals. All numbers are stored as double precision floating point numbers. Here you can see, var x is equal to 3.14 or var y is equal to 3. A number with decimals and a number without decimals. JavaScript strings. Here you can see we have an example of strings. Double quotes, single quotes. We can use both of them. JavaScript objects. JavaScript variables are containers for data values. Objects are variables too, but objects can contain many values. Here you can see. Type, yeah, model 500, color, white. We have different values in one variable with the name of object. What can JavaScript do? JavaScript can change HTML content. JavaScript can change HTML attribute values. JavaScript can change HTML style CSS. JavaScript can hide HTML elements. JavaScript can show HTML elements. What is ES5? ES5 is a shortcut for ECMAScript 5. ECMAScript 5 is also known as JavaScript 5. ECMAScript 5 is also known as ECMAScript 2009. ES5 published in 2009, that's why we call it ECMAScript 2009. ECMAScript 5 features. There were the new features released in 2009, like the use strict directive, string.train, and many more features that you can use. You'll learn all these things after learning JavaScript. What's the HTML DOM? The HTML DOM is an object model for HTML. It defines HTML elements as objects. Properties for all HTML elements. Methods for all HTML elements. Events for all HTML elements. The HTML DOM is an API programming interface for JavaScript. JavaScript can add, change, remove HTML elements. JavaScript can add, change, remove HTML attributes. JavaScript can add, change, remove CSS styles. JavaScript can react to HTML events. JavaScript can add, change, remove HTML events. The HTML DOM document object model. When a web page is loaded, the browser creates a document object model of the page. The HTML DOM model is constructed as a tree of objects, as you see in the image. Finding HTML elements. When you want to access HTML elements with JavaScript, you have to find the elements first. There are a couple of ways to do this. Finding HTML elements by ID, finding HTML elements by tag name, finding HTML elements by class name, finding HTML elements by CSS selectors, and finding HTML elements by HTML object collections. Here you can see we have different examples of them. Google Maps, phones, or Google APIs. You can add them by using HTML and JavaScript by calling them inside your project. My first Google Map, HTML code. Here you can see we have an example of Google Map HTML code. And here we have a JS code example of first Google Map. And also for using Google Map, we have to have a Google API link. Here you can see we have to add this link inside our HTML web page head part. And inside source, we have to add our own Google API link. My first Google chart. Here you can see we have Google API link, next we have JS code, and next we have HTML code. And here is an example of Google charts that we can use in our HTML web page. What's XML? XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. XML plays an important role in many different IT systems. XML is often used for distributing data over the internet. It's important for all web developers to have a good understanding of XML. What's AJAX? AJAX, or Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. AJAX is not a programming language. AJAX just uses a combination of a browser built-in XML HTTP request object to request data from web server and JavaScript and HTML DOM to display or use the data. AJAX allows web pages to be updated asynchronously by exchanging data with a web server behind the scenes. This means that it's possible to update parts of a web page without reloading the whole page. How AJAX works. Here you can see we have an example of it. An event occurs. An XML HTTP request object is created and sent an HTTP request, and this request will go through internet to server. The server will process HTTP request and will create a response and send data back to the browser. Then the response will go through the internet to the browser, and browser will process the returned data using JavaScript and will update the page content. AJAX example explained. Here you can see we have an HTML page. The HTML page contains a div section and a button. The div section is used to display information from a server. The button calls a function if it's clicked. The function requests data from a web server and displayed. Here you can see this is our function, load.doc function. What's JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON is a lightweight format for storing and transporting data. JSON is often used when data is sent from a server to a web page. JSON is self-describing and easy to understand. JSON syntax rules. Data is a name-value pairs. Data is separated by commas. Curly braces hold objects. Square brackets hold arrays. JavaScript Object Notation. The JSON format is syntactically identical to the code for creating JavaScript objects. Because of this similarity, a JavaScript program can easily convert JSON data into native JavaScript objects. JSON objects. Here you can see we have a simple JSON object. Next we have JSON arrays. Here you can see JSON arrays consist of JSON objects. Converting a JSON text to a JavaScript object. A common use of JSON is to read data from a web server and display the data in a web page. For simplicity, this can be demonstrated using a string input. First, create a JavaScript string containing JSON syntax. Here you can see. Next, use JavaScript built-in function JSON.parse to convert the string into a JavaScript object. Here you can see. What's CSS icons? Icons come in scalable vector libraries that can be customized with CSS. Common libraries are Phantasm icons, Bootstrap icons, and Google icons. To use icons, just add a link to the icon library, the head section of your HTML page, like for Phantasm icons or Google icons. What's Bootstrap? Bootstrap is the most popular CSS framework for developing responsive and mobile-first websites. Bootstrap 4 is the newest version of Bootstrap. Bootstrap 4 supports all major browsers except Internet Explorer 9. Bootstrap examples: Bootstrap colors, or Bootstrap text colors, and Bootstrap colors. Here you can see we have different examples and their output. All you need is just adding a class to your element, and Bootstrap styles will be implemented to it. What's Command Line Interface, or CLI? CLI stands for Command Line Interface, Command Line Interpreter, or Command Line Input. CLI is a command line program that accepts text input to execute operating system functions. In the 1960s, using only computer terminals, this was the only way to interact with computers. In the 1970s and 1980s, command line input was commonly used by Unix systems and PC systems like MS-DOS and Apple DOS. Today, with graphical user interface GUI, most users never use command line interface, or CLI. However, CLI is still used by software developers and system administrators to configure computers, install software, and access features that are not available in the graphical interface. Here we have some CLI examples. The Software Package Manager (NPM) uses command line input to install software. Here you can see. Or you can navigate your folders, directories with command line commands, as this example. And you can display all available commands with the help command. Use CLI commands with great attention. Wrong use can easily delete files or destroy your computer system completely. Here we have some basic Windows CLI commands, and also basic Linux CLI commands. You can go try it and learn it. NPM. What's NPM? NPM is the world's largest software registry. The registry contains over 800,000 code packages. NPM is also a software package manager and an installer. Open source developers use NPM to share software. Many organizations also use NPM to manage private development. Using NPM is free. NPM is free to use. You can download all NPM public software packages without any registration or logout. Command line client. NPM includes a CLI command line client that can be used to download and install software. For example, here you can see NPM install your package name. Installing NPM. NPM is installed with Node.js. This means that you have to install Node.js to get NPM installed on your computer. Download Node.js from the official Node.js website. Software Package Manager. The name NPM Node Package Manager stems from when NPM first was created as a package manager for Node.js. All NPM packages are defined in files called package.json. The content of package.json must be written in JSON. At least two fields must be present in the definition file, name and version. For example, here you can see managing dependencies. NPM can manage dependencies. NPM can, in one command line, install all the dependencies of a project. Dependencies are also defined in package.json. Sharing your software. If you want to share your own software in the NPM registry, you can sign in at www.npmjs.com. What's GitHub? GitHub is a code hosting platform for collaborating and version control. GitHub lets you and others work together on projects. Sign up for GitHub at https://github.com. GitHub essentials are repositories, branches, commits, pull requests, Git, the version control software GitHub is built on. For example, here, just add git push origin record and add your project to GitHub. GitHub repository. A GitHub repository can be used to store a development project. It can contain folders and any type of files like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, documents, data, name it. A GitHub repository should also include a license file and a README file about the project. A GitHub repository can also be used to store IDs or any resources that you want to share. GitHub branch. A GitHub branch is used to work with different versions of a repository at the same time. By default, a repository has a master branch, a production branch. Any other branch is a copy of the master branch, as it was at a point in time. New branches are for bug fixes and future work separate from the master branch. When changes are ready, they can be merged into the master branch. If you make changes to the master branch while working on a new branch, these updates can be pulled in. GitHub comments. At GitHub, changes are called commits. Each commit change has a description explaining why a change was made. GitHub pull requests. Pull requests are the heart of GitHub collaboration. With a pull request, you are proposing that your change should be merged, pulled in with the master. Pull requests show content differences, changes, additions, and subtractions in colors, green and red. As soon as you have a commit, you can open a pull request and start a discussion, even before the code is finished. A great way to learn GitHub before working on larger projects is to open pull requests in your own repository and merge them yourself. What's jQuery? jQuery is a JavaScript library. jQuery greatly simplifies JavaScript programming. jQuery is easy to learn. jQuery hide and show. With jQuery, you can hide and show HTML elements with the hide and show methods. For example, here you can see jQuery sliding. With jQuery, you can create sliding effects on HTML elements like slide down, slide out, slide toggle, and match one. Here it is. jQuery animation. By jQuery, you can create animations inside your HTML document. For example, here you can see jQuery manipulating CSS. By jQuery, you can manipulate CSS files too. Here you can see. What's AngularJS? AngularJS lets you extend HTML with HTML attributes called directives. AngularJS directives offers functionality to HTML applications. AngularJS provides built-in directives and user-defined directives. AngularJS directives. AngularJS uses double braces as placeholders for data. AngularJS directives are HTML attributes with the prefix ng. The ng app directive initializes an AngularJS application, and the ng init directive initializes application data. For example, here you can see the ng module directive. The ng module directive binds the value of HTML elements to application data. For example, here you can see the ng bind directive. The ng-bind directive binds data to a model. For example, here you can see. What's React? React is a JavaScript library created by Facebook. React is a user interface UI library. React is a tool for building UI components. Adding React to an HTML page. This is an example of adding React to an HTML page. What's Babel? Babel is a JavaScript compiler that can translate markup or programming language into JavaScript. With Babel, you can use the newest features of a JavaScript, like ES6 ECMAScript 2015. Babel is available for different conversations. React uses Babel to convert JS6 into JavaScript. Please note that the correct type text Babel is needed for using Babel. What's JS6? JS6 stands for JavaScript XML. JS6 is an XML HTML-like extension to JavaScript. Like here you can see. As you can see above, JS6 is not JavaScript narrational. JS6 is an XML syntax extension to JavaScript that also comes with the full power of ES6. Just like HTML, JS6 tags can have tag names, attributes, and children. If an attribute is wrapped in curly braces, the value is a JavaScript expression. Note that JS6 does not use codes around the HTML text string. React DOM render. This is an example of React DOM render. Create React obligation. Facebook has created a Create React obligation with everything you need to build a React app. It's a development server that uses Webpack to compile React, JS6, and ES6 autoperfect CSS files. The Create React app uses ESLint to test and warn about mistakes in the code. To create a Create React app, run the following code on your terminal. Here it is. npx create react app react tutorial. Make sure you have Node.js 5.2 or higher, otherwise you must install npx. Start one folder app from where you want your application to stay. Create React success result. Here you can see this is the result of creating a React. What's Vue.js? Vue.js lets you extend HTML with HTML attributes called directives. Vue.js directives offers functionality to HTML applications. Vue.js provides built-in directives and user-defined directives. Vue.js uses double braces as placeholders for data. Vue.js directives are HTML attributes with the prefix v. In the example below, a new Vue object is created with new Vue. The property el binds the new Vue object to the HTML element with id. Vue.js binding. When a Vue object is bound to an HTML element, the HTML element will change when the Vue object changes. Here it is. Vue.js two-way binding. The vModule directive binds the value of HTML elements to application data, as you see in your screen. Vue.js load binding. Using the v for directive to bind an array of Vue objects to an array of HTML elements. Do same as what you see on your screen. What's full stack? A full stack web developer is a person who can develop both client and server software. In addition to mastering HTML and CSS, he/she also knows how to program a browser, like using JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, or Vue, program a server, like using PHP, ASP, Python, or Node, program a database, like using SQL, SQLite, or MongoDB. What's full stack? To be a full stack web developer, you have to have the knowledge of front-end or client softwares. Here you can see like HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and Matchmore. Also server softwares or backend softwares, like PHP, ASP, C++, C#, Java, or Matchmore. You can learn just one of them or many of them. And here we have some popular stacks, like LAMP stack, JavaScript, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, LIMP stack, JavaScript, Linux, Nginx, MySQL, PHP, Ministack, JavaScript, MongoDB, Express, Angular.js, .js, Django stack, JavaScript, Python, Django, MySQL, Ruby on Rails, JavaScript, Ruby, SQLite, and Rails. Being a full-stack developer has some advantages and disadvantages. As advantage, you can master all the techniques involved in a development project. You can make a prototype very rapidly. You can provide help to all the team members. You can reduce the cost of the project. You can reduce the time used for team communication. You can switch between front and back-end development based on requirements. You can better understand all aspects of new and upcoming technologies. And as disadvantage, the solution chosen can be wrong for the project. The solution chosen can be dependent on developer skills. The solution can generate a key person risk, or being a full-stack developer is increasingly complex. What's full-stack JavaScript? JavaScript has been around for over 20 years. It's the dominant programming language in web development. In the beginning, JavaScript was a language for the web client, browser. Then came the ability to use JavaScript on the web server with Node.js. Today the hottest buzzword is full-stack JavaScript. The idea of full-stack JavaScript is that all software in a web application, both client-side and server-side, should be written using JavaScript only. Full-stack JavaScript developer. A full-stack JavaScript developer is a person who can develop both client and server software. In addition to mastering HTML and CSS, he/she also knows how to program a browser, like using JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, or Vue, program a server, like using Node.js, program a database, like using MongoDB, and has the knowledge of client software, like frontend, like HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and much more, or part of them, and server softwares, or backends, like PHP, ASP, C++, C#, and much more, or some of them. Full-stack JavaScript benefits. Code reuse, shared libraries, templates, and models. Best practice accumulated by 20 years of JavaScript. JavaScript is an evolving standard with a bright future. Good tutorials, easy to learn. No compilation, faster development, and great distribution by NPM, and GitHub repository, Git workflow. What's SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. SQL is a standard language for accessing databases. SQL has been an international standard ISO since 1987. SQL statements. To access a database, you use SQL statements. Like here you can see. SQL tables. A database must often contain one or more tables. Each table is identified by a name like customers or others. Here you can see. The table above contains 5 records, 1 for each customer, and 7 columns: customer ID, customer name, contact name, other city, postal code, country. The most important SQL statements. Select extracts data from a database. Update updates data in a database. Delete deletes data from a database. Insert inserts new data into a database. Create database creates a new database. Alter database modifies a database. Create table creates a new table. Alter table modifies a table. Drop table deletes a table. Create index creates an index. Drop index deletes an index. SQL keywords are not case sensitive. Select is the same as select with uppercase. Now we are done with web development fundamentals. What's next? Now you can go through different titles that you learned in our web development fundamentals, and as we had in web development roadmap, go through each of them and learn each of them fully in detail. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap, different frameworks, different JavaScript frameworks, Google features, and much more, as the roadmap that we had at the start minutes of this video. Thank you so much guys, subscribe our channel, hit the bell button, and share this video to friends, and wait for our next videos.